my original story about a couple's unexpected experience. During our storm, the wind howled outside, but inside our cabin, his breath was hotter than the crackling fire, my back pressed against the wooden wall, as David's lips traced a path down my neck. His fingers tangled in my hair, pulling just enough to make my breath catch. I could feel the weight of his body against mine, solid and certain. 7 days into our honeymoon, and West ill couldn't keep our hands off each. Though I arched toward him, lost in the sensual haze that surrounded us. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps that cut through our moment like ice water. David froze, his eyes meeting mine. We weren't expecting anyone. Not here, not in this remote mountain cabin, not in the middle of a snowstorm that had been raging for hours. Before we dive deeper, if you're enjoying this story, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and you'll never miss when I post something new. Plus, it's completely free. Now let's continue with what happened next. Ignore it, I whispered, pulling him back to me, but the knocking came again, more urgent. This time, David reluctantly pulled away, straightening his clothes. Kira, someone's out there in this storm. We have to check. His voice held that gentle firmness I couldn't argue with. I sighed, adjusting my sweater as he moved toward the door. When David swung it open, the wind thrust 5 snow-covered figures into our cabin. 3 men and 2 women, all looking like they'd battled the mountain itself. Their faces were red from the cold hair, damp with melting snow clothes clinging to their frames. Thank God. One of the men gasped, stomping his boots on our welcome mat. Tall with broad shoulders and a beard that couldn't hide his sharp jawline. We've been wandering for hours. Our guide got disoriented in the whiteout. The trail markers disappeared. One of the women added, her dark hair hung in wet strands around a face that might have been striking in better circumstances. We saw your chimney smoke. You're literally saving our lives. Right now, David, ever the gentleman, ushered them fully inside while I stood there, still processing the abrupt end to our intimate evening. 5 strangers in our honeymoon cabin. 5 people intruding on our perfect isolation. I'm David, and this is my wife, Kira. He emphasized wife with a touch of pride that still made my stomach flutter. We're here on our honeymoon. Oh God, we're so sorry, the second woman said, unwrapping a scarf from her neck. She was petite, with copper hair and freckles scattered across her nose. I'm Jess. This is Maya, Connor, Eric and Liam. She pointed to each of her companions in turn. We tried calling for help, but there's no signal up here, said the one named Liam, younger than the others, with an easy smile. Despite their predicament, power lines are probably down too, David replied, glancing at me with a silent question. I nodded, resigned. We couldn't send them back into the storm. You can stay until it passes, he offered, trying to sound more welcoming than I felt. The forecast said it should clear by tomorrow afternoon. That was how our honeymoon's sanctuary became an impromptu shelter for 7 people. David and I gave up our bedroom to the women while the men took the living room floor. We squeezed onto the small pull-out sofa in the study, my back pressed against his chest, his arm around my waist, his voice a whisper in my ear. Just one night, he promised, lips brushing my earlobe. Then we'll have the place to ourselves again. But the storm had other plans. By morning, these now had piled so high it covered half the windows. No one was going anywhere. Maya, the dark-haired woman, stood at the window, looking out at the white wasteland. We could be here for days, she said, turning to face us all. Something in her tone made me look closer at her. There was an intensity turtle gaze, a confidence in her posture that seemed to draw attention. Eric the bearded, one rummaged through his backpack. At least we have supplies. Food, some whiskey. He pulled out a bottle and set it on the counter with a solid thunk. The day passed slowly. We rationed our food, played cards, and shared stories. As night fell again, Eric opened his whiskey. The amber liquid burned pleasantly as this went down, warming me from the inside. We gathered around the fireplace. The dancing flames, casting long shadows. With each drink, the conversation flowed more freely. Laughter came easier, and the initial awkwardness began to dissolve. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, the firelight catching in her eyes. "You know what happens when strangers get trapped together?" she asked. Looking at each Ophis in turn, they either end up hating each other or becoming incredibly close. "Let's aim for option 2. Jess giggled, cheeks flushed from the whiskey. "I've an idea," Maya said, setting her glass down. "A game to pass the time." Connor, who'd been quiet most of the day, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of game?" Mia smiled, a slow curve of her lips that held something mysterious. "Game of truth and trust. Something to help us connect." I felt David shift beside me, his thigh pressing against mine. "What did you have in mind?" he asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "It's simple." Maya explained. "We ask questions, deep ones, or offer challenges. The point is to break down barriers." She looked at me and David. "You two are newlyweds. How open are you with each other?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "Or whiskey?" "Very," I said firmly. Maya's smile widened. "Perfect. Then this should be interesting." The game started, innocently enough. Questions about regrets, secrets, dreams. But as the whiskey continued to flow, as the wind howled outside, making our little cabin feel like the only safe place in the world, the questions grew bolder. "Have you ever fantasized about someone else while with your partner?" Liam asked, his gaze sweeping around the circle. Jess admitted she had. Connor confessed to an attraction to his best friend's girlfriend. Eric described a fantasy involving 2 women. Then it was David's turn. I held my breath, suddenly afraid of his answer. We'd known each other for 3 years, been married for barely 2 weeks. There was still so much to learn. "Yes," he said, simply, his eyes finding mine. "I've imagined Kira with someone else, watching her, seeing her pleasure from a different perspective." The room fell silent. I stared at him, heart pounding. We'd never discussed this. Not once had he hinted at such thoughts. "Your turn," Kira, Maya said softly. The whiskey made my head swim. 5 pairs of eyes watched me, 6 including David's, which held a question, a challenge, something I'd never seen before. "No," I whispered. "But I'm thinking about it now." A current seemed to pass through the room. Something had shifted. A door had been cracked open. Maya stood up slowly, stretching like a cat. "Let's make this more interesting," she suggested, her voice low. "It's time for challenges." "What kind of challenges?" Jess asked, leaning forward. "The kind that test boundaries," Maya replied. She moved toast and in front of David, looking down at him. "I challenge you to kiss someone in this room who isn't your wife." My breath caught jealousy, flared hot and immediate. But alongside it, something else stirred curiosity, excitement. David's eyes found mine, seeking permission, slowly inaudited. He stood towering over Maya. For a moment, I thought he would choose her. Instead, he turned to Jess, who looked surprised but pleased. Their lips met briefly, a gentle press that lasted only seconds, but seemed to stretch time. When David returned to his seat, his hand found mine, squeezing reassuringly. The game continued, challenges growing bolder. Jess had to let Eric trace her silhouette with his fingertips. Her eyes closed, breath quickening. Liam and Connor had to maintain eye contact for a full minute, the tension between them palpable. Then Maya turned to me. "I challenge you to let David whisper his fantasy to you, the one he just mentioned. While I kiss your neck, see if you can stay focused on his words." The room blurred around me, narrowing to just her face, then David's. I felt dizzy, not from alcohol, but from possibility. This was crossing a line. This was our honeymoon. These were strangers. Yet I found myself. Nodding, Maya moved behind me as David leaned in, closed his lips, brushing my ear. "I've imagined you letting go completely," he began, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine, "seeing you from across the room. While someone else discovers what only I know." Maya's lips touched the sensitive spot just below my ear, so light I might have imagined it. But then she pressed harder, a deliberate kiss that made May gasp. "I've thought about watching your face," David continued, "seeing the pleasure in your eyes, knowing that when it's over, you'll still come back terms." Maya's mouth traced a path down my neck, her breath warm against my skin. My AS fluttered, closed my body, responding to her touch, even as David's words wrapped around me. "Because it's not about them," he whispered. "It's about use, expanding what we share, testing our trust." When I opened my eyes, the room had changed. The air felt thicker, charged with anticipation. Jess was watching us, with parted lips, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The men's eyes were dark focused. Maya stepped back, her fingertips trailing across my shoulder. "I think we've moved beyond the game," she said. What followed happened in fragments, moments of clarity within a dreamlike haze. Clothes were shed, slowly, deliberately. Consent was asked for, and given in whispers and nods, in the press of skin against skin. The firelight cast everyone in gold, highlighting curves and angles, turning ordinary bodies into works of art. David never left my side. His hand remained entwined with mine, even as Maya's lips moved down my stomach, even as Eric's mouth found my shoulder, even as Jess's fingers traced patterns on my thigh. I watched David's face as Liam's hands explored his chest, as Connor's lips met this. There was wonder there and heat, but most importantly, there was love for me. For this experience we were sharing, the boundaries between bodies blurred. Where became a constellation of sensation, hands, lips, whispers, sighs. My body responded to touches I couldn't identify, to kisses from mouths I didn't know. David and I found each other again and again within the tangle of limbs. Our eyes meeting, confirming, reassuring. When I finally arched back, overcome by waves of pleasure I couldn't contain, it was David's name I called, and when he followed, his body tensing, his breath catching, it was my eyes he sought. Hours later, as dawn broke and the storm began to subside, we lay, tangled together, 7 strangers who were no longer strange to each other. The fire had died down to embers, casting a soft glow over skins lit with sweat, over faces relaxed in satisfaction. The roads should be clear by noon. Connor murmured, his fingers absently tracing patterns on Jess's shoulder from Maya, her head resting on Eric's chest, looked over at David and me. Some honeymoon? Huh. I laughed softly, nestled against David, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. Unforgettable. I agreed. By afternoon, the snow had melted. No, for them to leave, we exchanged numbers, made vague promises to stay in touch, that we all knew might not happen. When the door closed behind them, David and I stood in the sudden silence, wondering if we'd imagined it all. "Are you okay?" he asked, his arms encircling my waist, his eyes searching. Mine, I considered the question carefully. Was he okay? We had just shared something most couples never would. We had crossed lines, broken taboos, ventured into territory that could strengthen or destroy us. Yes, I said. Finally, I think I am with you, I am. He smiled relieved. I meant what I said. It was never about them, I know. And I did know, somehow in the midst of the most intimate experience imaginable, with multiple partners, David and I had found a deeper connection, a trust that transcended physical bonds. We spent our final days in the cabin reconnecting, just the two of us making love, with the new awareness of each other, with the memories of other hands, other lips enhancing, rather than diminishing what he shared. When we finally returned home, life resumed its normal pace. Work, friends, family, none of whom would ever guess what had happened in that mountain cabin. Sometimes I caught David watching me with a small smile, a private remembrance passing between us. Sometimes I woke from dreams of firelight on skin-off whispers in the dark. 6 months later, a postcard arrived. A mountain scene, 5 signatures on the back, no message, just a date. Exactly 1 year from our storm-bound night, David stood behind me as I read it, his chin resting on my shoulder. What do you think? He asked, his voice carefully. Neutral, I turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. What do you want? His eyes darkened. I want what makes you happy. I want us, whatever form that takes. It about the doors we had opened, about the trust we had built. Let's see where we are when the date comes, I said, finally, but I'm not ruling. It sabered out. He kissed me then deep and slow, his hands tangling in my hair, the way they had that first night in the cabin before. The knock on the door changed everything. Some storms appear without warning and leave your world forever changed. He ever experienced something that transformed your relationship in ways you never expected, something that showed you sides of your partner and yourself you never knew existed? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences matter to me. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the complexity of human connection. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful growth happens in the aftermath of a storm.